She discovers hope in despair. Rancher S. touching promise transforms their lives forever. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the sprawling fields of the ranch that had been Grace's world since childhood. The laughter of her father echoed through the land, a constant reminder of the legacy she was now tasked with preserving. At 34, a single mother battling the harshness of life alone, she felt the weight of every whisper, every doubting glance aimed her way. The corporate giant on the prowl, looking to dismantle her heritage for profit, only added to her fierce determination. "Not on my watch," she'd murmured to herself countless times, steeling her resolve. But the fear gnawed at her, a relentless companion, reminding her that her efforts might not be enough. As the day wore on, the reality of her situation crashed upon her like the dry, cracked earth beneath her boots. Caleb, her brilliant 10-year-old son, watched her with wide eyes filled with admiration. Yet she feared the truth of their circumstances would soon shatter his youthful dreams. Would he still look up to his mother if the ranch was lost? "Mom, what if we had to leave?" His innocent query shot straight through her heart, echoing the very doubts tormenting her. Grace clenched her jaw, fighting the racing thoughts in her mind. She couldn't imagine losing everything her father worked for, everything he believed in. Yet how could she shield Caleb from the harsh reality that shadowed them? The town, steeped in tradition, had rarely seen a woman take the reins of a ranch, and now they were fanning the flames of gossip against her. A false accusation had risen from the ashes of ignorance, a rumor drawing lines she desperately wished to blur. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Hank's arrival had brought an unexpected spark of hope. The elderly neighbor had weathered storms that could level mountains, and his stories had breathed life back into her resolve. "You gotta stand tall, Grace," he said, voice gruff yet calming. "It's the storms that shape the strongest trees." But as the days drug on with the corporate threat looming closer, compounded by the rumors that sliced at her already fragile reputation, doubt snaked into her heart. Now, standing at the edge of the town hall, poised to share the truth that could either salvage her ranch or seal its fate, she felt the heavy swell of anxiety drumming a beat in her chest. The stares of the townspeople were like silhouettes in her periphery, their skepticism reaching out to grip her. She yearned for Caleb's hand to cling to, a small anchor amidst the crashing waves of doubt. What if her fight wasn't enough? What if just as she inhaled to clear her thoughts, a figure stepped forward from the crowd, casting a long shadow across her already fading resolve? The grip of uncertainty squeezed tightly around her heart. Who was this person, this intruder, threatening everything she was prepared to fight for? Panic clamored in her chest, amplifying the turbulence in her mind. Would they help or hinder? Would they stand by her side? Or was this the beginning of her undoing? As she grapples with this unexpected challenge, Grace realizes the battle for her ranch is deeper than land. It's about preserving her identity, her son's dreams, and the very essence of family. The stakes had never been higher, and with every second ticking away, she felt the weight of her father's legacy and her son's future hanging in the balance. Grace's heart raced as she stared at the newcomer, a well-dressed man whose polished shoes kicked up dust that swirled in the hot Texas sunlight. He gripped a portfolio tightly under one arm, and an odd mixture of confidence and arrogance danced on his features. This was not just an onlooker. He was a figure from the very world she had spent weeks trying to fend off the corporate investors aiming to strip her of everything she held dear. "What brings you here?" The words slipped from her mouth, carried by a sudden burst of defiance, even as her palms grew clammy. She had rehearsed countless responses in her mind, but confronting him in person was a different tidal wave entirely. The man stepped closer, radiating a calm that disconnected him from the tempest swirling around her. "I'm Mark Henderson," he replied, lightly tapping the portfolio against his thigh. "I'm with Grayson Enterprises. We might have a proposal that could benefit both of us." Laughter bubbled up in Grace's throat, but died out the moment she met his intent gaze. What could he possibly offer? A buyout? An empty promise wrapped in the allure of capital? She could hear the undertow of whispers from the gathered crowd, feeling their curious eyes hanging on her every word. "I'm not interested, Mr. Henderson. You can't simply waltz in here expecting me to sell what my family built," she said, her voice a mixture of steel and trembling fear. "Let us not jump to conclusions." He maintained his composure, though it only fueled her anger. "You're fighting against insurmountable odds. We can help you keep the ranch without you having to compromise your ideals." His suggestion stung like a slap, awakening a dormant part of her, one yearning for a way out of the relentless grind, but rebelling against the idea of capitulation. "Help me? You mean sell me a pack of lies?" she snapped, and with every ounce of resolve, she embraced the fire in her gut. "I know how corporations like yours operate. You destroy families for profit. I want to let that happen." Yet as she spoke, an unsettling flicker of regret sparked within her. Had she just rejected an opportunity, however slim? Did desperation necessitate partnership with someone whose every word seemed laced with ulterior motives and deception? Think about the possibilities. His voice dropped, now a fervent whisper meant only for her ears. "You've been fighting the good fight, but you can't be naive forever. There's a sustainable future for your ranch, but it requires investment, and investment in what?" She interrupted, feeling the tension tightrope between them. "In a vision that strips me of everything I love? This ranch is my life, not just a business." The crowd was no longer just a background noise of societal expectation. Their filled eyes were mirrors reflecting her inner turmoil. Here she was standing in vigil for her father's legacy, but amid her righteous anger and desperate defiance, a question nagged at her. Was there a path forward that didn't involve ruinous sacrifice? As she peered deeper into Mark's gaze, searching for sincerity, she saw something else, a flicker of understanding, maybe even respect. Would he really help preserve her ranch, or was she simply imagining possibilities where none existed? The murmurs increased, and the unknown in Mark's eyes began to stir something new within her, a vague sense of hope. Maybe this encounter, however disconcerting, was a catalyst for an awakening she hadn't anticipated. As she processed the weight of her decisions, her thoughts turned again to Caleb. What future was she striving for, and what path might ultimately lead her to victory? With a sudden pull of audacity, she squared her shoulders. "I'll consider your words, Mr. Henderson. But if you're playing games, I assure you, you'll lose." He smiled, and for the first time, it seemed genuine, a slow expression of respect, perhaps even admiration. The stakes were escalating. The battle for survival was imminent. But with one possible thread of opportunity in front of her, a new tension unfurled, urging her toward a confrontation she did not yet fully comprehend. The question weighed on her, as heavy as the Texas sun. Could she play this game without losing herself? Grace stepped back, feeling the heat of the sun on her skin meld with the warmth of the crowd's expectant gaze. This was more than just a negotiation. This was an intersection of her past and potential future, a path fraught with peril and possibility. As Mark's smile lingered, she wrestled with the implications of their conversation. Each heartbeat echoed her internal conflict. Safety versus authenticity, allegiance to her heritage versus the allure of survival. She turned on her heel, needing space to breathe, to think. The ranch, her father's legacy, loomed large in her mind. She had raised animals, tilled the land, and poured her heart into every corner of the place, a sanctuary that had also become her prison. But now, what if the answer lay in collaboration instead of confrontation? She didn't want to let go of what made her who she was, yet the fear of losing it all by her own hand gnawed at her. Sitting beneath the old oak tree that had witnessed her childhood memories, She considered the wildflowers that sprouted defiantly around its base, thriving despite the harsh environment. Perhaps it was time to engage with adversity differently. As self-doubt stirred, she recalled the countless nights laying awake, desperately exploring the options that seemed to erode by the day. Grace clenched her jaw, exhaling sharply. This wasn't about capitulating, it was about evolving. Rising up from the ashes of her caution, she decided to view Mark's proposal as a slippery thread rather than a noose. She would have to be vigilant, navigate carefully, but perhaps accepting help could bolster the foundations of her sanctuary rather than crumble them. She spent the evening poring over old ledgers, her fingers tracing the faded figures documenting years of toil and triumph. Every number told a story, an era that she fought fiercely to uphold. With each page turning, clarity washed over her. She realized that preservation required adaptation. Perhaps this digression into Mark's world wasn't a betrayal of her father's memory. It could be the very bridge to sustaining it. The next day, she resolved to meet him again, but this time with an edge of purpose. She would ask hard questions, demand transparency, wield her knowledge like a sword. As she approached their appointed meeting spot, a rickety old barn on the property, her heart quickened in anticipation. This time, she wouldn't be a mere player in his game. She would negotiate terms that safeguarded her vision for the ranch. Mark arrived promptly, his portfolio seeming heavier under the weight of her scrutiny. "Glad to see you again, Grace." His voice was smooth, but there was a glint in his eye, as if he sensed the shift in her stance. "Let us talk strategy," she stated, self-assured. She had shifted from defensiveness to determination, and she could feel an undercurrent of power coursing through her. "What exactly does your proposal entail? And what sacrifices are you expecting in return?" The surprised look on his face brought a smile to her lips. Whatever reservations she felt were now overshadowed by her commitment to her family's memory and her own burgeoning resolve. Mark's confidence morphed into excitement as he unfurled his plans, overlapping their interests in ways Grace had not considered. He spoke of sustainable farming practices and partnerships that could enhance visibility and reach without compromising the ranch's soul. It was a foreign language, but she began to grasp the syntax of collaboration. Yet, as he detailed his vision, another part of her resisted, something primal, urging her to tread carefully. Was she listening to his words, or merely the cadence of desire for acceptance? Still, there was a flicker of intrigue in her mind. Could they forge a path together that sustained her legacy while allowing it room to grow? As they paused, the air thick with possibilities, Grace's resolve hardened. This wasn't merely about the ranch anymore. It was about cultivating her spirit, embodying her values, and confronting the demons of despair that had long haunted her. In this moment of newfound partnership, she faced a horizon laden with shadows of uncertainty, but also of hope. Across the divide lay a chance for reinvention, and she would seize it. As Mark looked at her, the tension returned subtly, a reminder that the safety of legacy could sway precariously in the balance. What shadows might emerge as they pursued this new venture? The questions lingered. She felt the thrill of the unknown tugging at her heartstrings. Would trust blossom, or would betrayal lurk anew? This was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead. The next day dawned with a clarity Grace hadn't felt in ages. As sunlight poured through her window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, she felt the weight of her resolve settle firmly on her shoulders. She had taken a step that morning, and while there was uncertainty in her stomach, there was also a fierce determination rising within her. She made a list that morning, detailing every concern and question she had about Mark's proposal. What was the timeline for changes he envisioned? How would he handle the day-to-day operations? Would he be there, or would he step back after the initial setup? With a focused mind, she organized her thoughts like she once did with her herd, each detail critical to maintaining the overall balance. Grace felt an exhilarating rush in her veins. She was reclaiming control. A part of her had always known that adapting to difficult circumstances was essential, and now she was ready to put that belief into practice. She envisioned a scenario where she could wield her past and present with equal vigor, a future illuminated by negotiation rather than desperation. Arriving at the barn once more, she discovered Mark lost in thought, sketching out ideas on a notepad. He looked up, the surprise in his expression shifting to one of admiration as he saw the seriousness on her face. "You look like you've got something on your mind," he said, his tone light, but it held a solemn note that demanded her earnestness. "Let us get to the heart of this," she replied, her resolve tightening. "I need specifics. We can't just talk in circles about visions. I need numbers, plans, metrics for success." The tension in the air thickened as he acknowledged her demand. She could see the wheels turning in his mind. He wasn't used to this version of Grace, intensely present and unequivocally bold. "All right," he admitted, raising his hands slightly in surrender. "Let us break it down." As Mark shared numbers and projections, Grace absorbed each detail while analyzing every claim with a scrutinizing eye. She asked about the finances, the projected yield from their forthcoming partnership, and the sustainability practices he had implied. What began as a cavalcade of abstract ideas crystallized into something tangible, backed by hard facts and figures she could grasp. But beneath the commitment she exuded lay an unrelenting pulse of doubt. Would these figures hold up? Could she trust that he wouldn't stray from their agreed path once momentum built? Why the ranch? She probed, grounding their conversation in sincerity. Why not choose another project that would require less effort? The answer came swiftly, anchored in conviction. Mark articulated how legacy resonated with him, too, how the struggles of family meant overcoming hardships, finding joy in continuity, and building new paths in the face of adversity. She and T expected his words to resonate so deeply. It was as if he echoed her own desires, threading his understanding of legacy into her fears. As she listened, her internal barriers danced dangerously close to crumbling, yet she held firm. She could see a flicker of a shared vision, the way they both sought sustainability, not just for land, but for their spirits. In this collaborative space, where uncertainty met ambition, Grace felt the fierce bond between them strengthen. She was crafting her fate and finding an unexpected ally in Mark, someone who could amplify her resolve instead of undermining it. However, this was not merely about practicality anymore. The shadows of her past whispered warnings, murmuring betrayals she had witnessed. Memories of broken agreements and abandoned dreams resurfaced, pressing down on her like a thick fog. As the conversation drifted towards plans for marketing and outreach, she found herself hedged against trust. Had she overlooked something critical in her eagerness? Was she blindly following a fleeting glimmer of hope? "Grace," Mark's voice pulled her back. "Let us create a pathway that honors both our visions. I believe we can innovate without losing what matters." His certainty was a balm, yet worry ignited within her. She had often promised herself to tread cautiously, aware that ambition without careful planning could lead to ruin. The day wore on as they continued to flesh out details. Each of Grace's questions met with insight gained from experience. Insight turned to anticipation, and anticipation blossomed into a configuration of possibilities, yet the specter of betrayal loomed large in her mind. "Can we build this together?" she asked, vulnerability threading through her otherwise strong facade. "We can," Mark replied gently, "but trust will be essential." As the sun began to dip beyond the horizon, and the shadows stretched long across the barn, Grace felt an unfamiliar mix of anxiety and excitement, each decision echoing in the space between them, whispering implications that were far greater than either anticipated. What consequences awaited them as they tread further into the unknown? Would trust take root, or would the darkness around them lead to a fracture she could never anticipate? The path before her still lay shrouded in uncertainty, a tangled web woven with both hope and fear. The following day, Grace woke with a buoyancy that felt foreign yet welcome. She had spent the night wrestling with the details of their conversation, mulling over every number, every plan, and the weight of trust that hovered between her and Mark. The morning light poured into her kitchen, reflecting her renewed spirit. She felt a hunger not just for the success of the ranch, but for a deeper understanding of her own capabilities, how she could shape not just the land, but also her destiny. As the aroma of freshly brewed coffee permeated the air, Grace grabbed her notebook, her heart thrumming with determination. The blank pages stared back at her, a canvas waiting to be filled with her vision, her roadmap, not just as a rancher, but also as a leader. She got dressed quickly, her thoughts racing with plans for the day. She would focus not just on the logistics of a ranch, but on fostering the collaboration she envisioned with Mark. Today wasn't just about numbers. It was about constructing a partnership built on shared values and mutual respect. Arriving early at the barn, Grace was surprised to find Mark already there. He was thumbing through materials for marketing strategies, the early morning sunlight catching the contours of his concentrated expression. For a fleeting moment, she felt an unexpected rush of empathy toward him. He was as invested in this as she was, perhaps more. "Morning," she greeted, a hint of warmth creeping into her voice. He looked up, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "You're early. Ready to dive in?" Her heart swelled slightly, buoyed by his enthusiasm. "I've been thinking, maybe we should not just discuss marketing, but also how the ranch's story can resonate with our community. We need to be transparent about our goals, create a narrative that connects with people emotionally." Mark nodded, intrigued. "That's a brilliant approach. People like stories, especially when they feel they're part of something bigger." As they began brainstorming, Grace felt a new energy coursing through the conversation. They tossed around ideas about social media campaigns that reflected their values of sustainability, community, and legacy. Every suggestion built on the last, and for the first time, doubt began to dissolve into a sense of shared purpose. However, even amidst the growing connection, a whisper of worry lurked at the back of Grace's mind. She questioned whether Mark's enthusiasm would stand the test of time, or if she was still being naive. Her previous experiences loomed like specters, hesitant to release their grip on her resolve. "Do you think people will buy into our story?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly as she laid bare her vulnerability. Mark paused, his expression shifting to one of understanding. "They will if we live it. Authenticity is key. We need to believe in it ourselves first. This isn't just a business venture. It's about creating a legacy that matters." His words resonated deeply, intertwining with her ambition. The idea of legacy was no longer a distant concept. It became an imperative. Yet the risk of failure still hovered, reminding her of the betrayal she had once endured. Would she falter again in her trust, or could she truly open herself to this new venture? As the hours slipped away, they mapped out plans on paper, transforming abstract thoughts into actionable strategies. Combining their ideas felt like crafting a tapestry of vibrant threads, each woven tightly yet distinct. Grace found herself increasingly invested not just in the outcome, but in Mark's vision as well. Suddenly, an idea flashed in Grace's mind, and she couldn't contain her excitement. What if we initiated community events at the ranch? Hands-on experiences that allow people to interact with the land, see what we're doing, and feel that connection firsthand. Mark's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "That's brilliant. It's a way to build trust one interaction at a time. You're right. If we can get them involved, they'll become advocates for us." In that moment, as they reveled in possibilities, a newfound sense of clarity emerged within Grace. She was learning to merge instinct with strategy, allowing herself to embrace both the emotional and the practical aspects of this partnership. But just as joy began to surge through her, a darkness loomed within the recesses of her thoughts. She realized that an obstacle remained her capacity to fully let her guard down. Was she ready to navigate the complexities of trust again? As Grace prepared to articulate her feelings to Mark, her mind spiraled. Would she reveal her fears openly or hold on just a bit longer, guarding her heart against unanticipated injury? The stakes had never felt higher, and the path forward remained lined with both hope and trepidation. With the world outside buzzing with potential and their plans gradually crystallizing into focus, Grace took a deep breath. The time had come to confront her apprehensions head-on. What if trust faltered yet again? Or worse, what if it forced her to experience the wounds of the past all over? Her resolve solidifying, Grace understood in that moment that confronting her fears was the only true course toward freedom. But would she have the courage to voice her vulnerabilities, to risk everything she had rebuilt once again, or was she destined to remain shackled by her past? As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the barn, she took a step forward, ready to face both the light of possibility and the darkness of her fears in the same breath. Grace met Mark's gaze, her heartbeat a steady thrum as if urging her forward. This moment held the power to redefine everything: the partnership, her commitment to the ranch, and her trust in herself. She couldn't ignore the rising tide of emotion boiling beneath her surface, a clash of vulnerability and ambition warring for dominance. "Mark," she began, her voice steadier than she anticipated, "I need to talk about where I stand with this. Everything feels so risky." The pulse of uncertainty lingered in her chest, a lingering ghost from the past. "What do you mean?" His brow furrowed in sincere concern as he leaned closer, a subtle yet powerful gesture that indicated he was all in, ready for her honesty. "I mean trusting someone again, letting you in on something that feels so deeply personal to me," she admitted, the words spilling forth in cautious honesty. "What if I misjudge your intentions? What if this all crumbles? I believed before, and it backfired." Mark's expression softened, understanding evident in his eyes. "I can't promise it'll be perfect, Grace, but I can promise that I'll match your authenticity with my own. If we're going to build something together, it has to be real." His earnestness ignited a flicker of hope within her, both thrilling and terrifying. It was simple yet profound. What they aimed to forge was more than a business. It was a shared vision leading towards purpose. She took a deep breath, the air filling her with the promise of liberation. "I want to believe that. I really do." The admission itself felt transformative, a step away from the confines of past betrayals that had kept her shackled in fear. As they delved deeper, co-creating a marketing strategy centered on emotional authenticity and community engagement, each melding idea reinforced her budding sense of agency. Conversations flowed, dynamic and charged, as she began to realize something: significant collaboration could offer strength not only in business but in her personal growth. What if we also set aside time to reflect on what each event means for both of us? Not just implementation, but the why behind it, she proposed, her enthusiasm igniting a new charge in their brainstorming. Mark nodded, his enthusiasm palpable. "That's insightful. We need to embed those reflections into our messages. It will keep us grounded in our motivations." As they sketched out plans, Grace felt a grounding shift within herself, a realization that roots ran deeper than fear. That space of contemplation could heal, could help her reconcile the ambitious rancher she wanted to become with the vulnerability that often left her exposed. But as ideas turned to actionable strategies, a gnawing thought crept in, undermining her newfound clarity. Did she have the endurance to navigate the trials that lay ahead? Expectations were rising, but so were the risks. With potential success came the possibility of failure, and the sting of that had yet to fully fade. Grace's mind wandered to the past, the betrayal that had echoed in her decisions. Did she have enough resilience left to build something sturdy? Or was she teetering on the edge of repeating history? In that moment of introspection, Mark's voice brought her back, cutting through the doubt. "Grace, whatever hurdles we face, we approach them as a team. That is essential for me. We're stronger together." The sincerity in his words granted her a sliver of solace, but it came bundled with a challenge. Trust was not a given. It was actively cultivated and fiercely guarded. To truly engage in this partnership meant relinquishing her guard, even if only a little, and that was not easy. She nodded, contemplating her next move. Okay, let's meet weekly review what's working, what's not, and how we feel about it, she suggested, testing the waters of accountability that could bind them together. That sounds like an excellent plan, he affirmed, his smile radiating encouragement. Yet, as they turned back to their strategic discussions, Grace felt the weight of her decision pressing down, a double-edged sword of leadership and vulnerability perched on her shoulders. Suddenly, an unsettling thought struck. If she was willing to lay her trust on the line, how would she respond if things turned south? Would she question her decision-making again, second-guess her worth? The fear of inadequacy threatened to surface anew, like a specter haunting her progress. As they concluded their day of planning, the path forward illuminated itself against the backdrop of her uncertainties. Grace would confront those fears, and she was aware that true growth came from daring to leap into the unknown even when shadows of doubt loomed large. With the evening sky darkening, Grace lingered on the threshold of their plans. Could she emerge from the shadows where past experiences lurked, or would she allow those fears to suffocate her ambitions? The wind rustled through the barn, echoing her internal struggle and urging her to make a choice. Tomorrow, she would decide if she really was ready to embrace this partnership fully. But as hope clashed with the haunting shadow of mistrust, the stakes grew higher than before. Could she truly unearth strength in vulnerability and pave a way toward resilience? Or was it a dream destined to flicker out? The morning sun broke over the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across the ranch. Grace stood at the threshold of her barn, taking in the familiar sights and sounds, yet everything felt altered. Today was a day of reckoning. Each breath was charged with electricity, a precursor to what lay ahead as she prepared to meet Mark for their first reflective session. As she walked towards the office, her heart raced with a mix of anticipation and dread. Each step echoed her internal dialogue, questioning her resolve. Would she truly be able to face her fears head-on? Again, the memories of past disappointments played in her mind, as vividly as the sounds of hoofbeats that surrounded her. Grace entered the office, finding Mark already at the table, papers sprawled in front of him. His focus shifted to her as she approached, a welcoming smile lighting up his features. It calmed her nerves momentarily, instilling a flicker of determination within her. "Good morning, Grace. Ready to dive in?" he asked, the sincerity in his voice grounding her. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "Yes, I think so. Let us start by reviewing our objectives and how they align with our personal goals." Mark leaned back, hands clasped together. "Great idea. I've been thinking a lot about authenticity in our messaging, but even more about our own journeys. What does this partnership mean for you, personally?" Grace shifted in her seat, suddenly aware of the weight of his question. This wasn't just about the business. It was about her. "It means a second chance, a chance to define success differently than I have in the past. But it also terrifies me," she admitted, her honesty infusing the room with intensity. "Fear is a natural part of growth," Mark acknowledged, his eyes steady as if urging her to continue. "What specifically are you afraid of?" Her voice trembled slightly. "I'm afraid of repeating history, of being let down or letting someone down. The stakes feel higher now, like I'm risking more than just my business." Mark nodded, absorbing her words. "That makes sense. But remember, it's not about perfection. It's about progress. Trust doesn't just happen. It's built through vulnerability and communication." The dialogue brought forth an unexpected wave of potential. Grace was beginning to see vulnerability not as a weakness, but a strength, a tool for resilience. "So, you're saying that we need to embrace mistakes as part of our learning process?" "Exactly," he affirmed, admiration in his gaze. "Every setback can be a stepping stone if we approach it together. Let us guarantee that this partnership thrives by keeping a dialogue open, exploring our feelings, and recalibrating our goals as needed." A tentative hope burgeoned within her. This laid the foundation for deeper collaboration, but also forced her to confront her willingness to be vulnerable. "All right then," she replied, steeling her resolve. "Let us set some initial benchmarks. What if we measure our success not just in profits, but also in how we each feel about our journey? I like that. Mark responded enthusiastically, his eyes brightening. This partnership can be about personal growth as much as business growth. Let us create a safe space for that. Gradually, as they structured their strategies around this newfound venture, Grace felt her confidence begin to solidify. The echoes of self-doubt receded slightly, replaced by the prospect of personal evolution intertwined with their professional endeavors. Each plan they crafted transformed into a reflection of both their ambitions and the personal values they sought to uphold. Yet, just as hope coursed through her veins, a troubling thought crept back in. What if she misstepped? Would the acceptance they were building crumble under the weight of her mistakes? The lingering specter of disappointment still haunted her, cloaked in the uncertainties of the future. Mark caught her hesitation. Remember, Grace, we're both learning here. We're allowed to stumble. Just don't forget that we're in this together. His words awakened something within her, a recognition that she wasn't alone in her struggle for growth. With a newfound willingness to embrace uncertainty, Grace forged forward into uncharted territory, ready to confront whatever experiences awaited them. As they concluded their session and prepared to execute their plans, Grace felt an exhilarating shift within her. They were building a partnership defined by honesty and courage, and perhaps, in doing so, she could finally overcome the shadows of her past. Yet, as they stepped outside into the bright, expansive ranch, the vastness of possibilities unfurled before them. It became clear that while she was embracing the path of growth, lurking uncertainties remained. What would happen when the idyllic plans met the harsh realities of the ranch life, the very life that could either bolster or shatter their budding dreams? Tomorrow promised more than just clarity. It promised trials that would truly test her resilience. Could she hold on to her newfound trust when confronted with challenges that threatened to dismantle everything they were building? The answers lay uncharted, and a fierce anticipation electrified the air around her. The following morning dawned with a heavy, brooding sky, gray clouds gathering ominously above the ranch. As Grace sipped her coffee, the warmth of the liquid contrasted sharply with the unease brewing in her stomach. She had spent the night replaying her conversation with Mark, dissecting every word, every pause. Vulnerability had felt like a breakthrough then, but now it seemed a fragile veneer that could shatter at any moment. Determined not to succumb to her fears, she grabbed her jacket and stepped outside. The air was crisp, cutting through her thoughts with an invigorating chill. The livestock at the barn stirred, their low murmurs grounding her momentary spirals into self-doubt. She approached the corral, the sight of the horses urging her forward. Animals were honest. Their needs were clear, and she understood them in ways that felt increasingly distant from the complexities of human relationships. Mark arrived shortly after, parked his truck, and climbed out with an energetic wave. "Ready for another round?" he called, his enthusiasm infectious despite the oppressive weather. Grace offered a hesitant smile. She was fueled by a mix of reluctance and a burning desire to push through the unsettling fog that shrouded her mind. "Let us do this," she replied, steeling herself as they made their way to the office. The space was transformed now, filled with collaborative energy and charts that detailed their shared vision. They spent hours dissecting their goals, but as they planned for the upcoming week, Grace couldn't ignore the gnawing worry lodged deep within her. What would happen when the plans met the inevitable chaos of ranch life? "Grace, I have a thought," Mark sparked, catching her distracted gaze. "How about we introduce some hands-on training sessions with the team? Let us see how we can shape their skills while we find our stride as partners." Her first instinct was to recoil. The thought of opening up the ranch to more people felt daunting. Then, the realization hit her. It was an invitation for collaboration. Could this serve as a platform for personal and professional development, not just for her, but for everyone involved? Maybe it could help connect us better. She ventured, tentatively embracing the idea. As the conversation progressed, Grace found herself increasingly drawn into the potential of this initiative. It wasn't just about teaching others. It was about learning from them too, a notion that felt radical yet exciting. She began to see that each person who stepped onto the ranch brought unique insights, each experience a thread that could weave in her narrative of growth. However, with the concept came the intricate web of vulnerability. Would she falter as a leader? Could she handle the scrutiny of her decisions? The prospect of judgment loomed menacingly in her mind. "Let me ask you this," Mark interjected, sensing her wavering confidence. "What would happen if you could trust not just yourself, but your team to explore new territories with you?" His probing opened a floodgate. Images of past failures swept through her, their weight nearly paralyzing. But beneath them lay the burgeoning belief that she could rise from those mistakes. Her strength was rooted in the awareness that she did not have to shoulder every burden alone. "We keep moving forward," she finally answered, her voice steadier than she felt. "Exactly," Mark affirmed, his eyes lighting up. "This is about growth, not just for you, but for every person involved. Trust is an evolving journey, not a destination." The words reverberated within her. Could she truly embrace collective growth and relinquish the heavy load she had carried for so long? Was it possible that her acceptance of imperfection could make her vulnerable enough to allow others to uplift her? As they sat amidst the charts, the discussions pulsated with new possibilities, and with each suggestion, she felt the rigid lines of her past start to blur. But threads of deep-seated fear still lingered at the edges. What if her endeavors failed? Might her reputation crumble before her very eyes, undoing all she had hoped to build? Such questions chased each other through her mind like nervously galloping horses, forcing her to confront a new reality. Resolutely, she looked at Mark and said, "If we do this, I want to commit to fostering this environment of trust and learning. It won't be easy, but I want to try." "Then we're on the right path," Mark replied, his contagious optimism weaving a safety net around her trepidation. As they wrapped up their insights for the day, Grace stepped outside, inhaling deeply, allowing the fresh air to invigorate her spirit. She was teetering on a precipice, balancing the weight of her fears against the promise of transformation. Tomorrow would bring the first training session a chance to test her theories and confront her vulnerabilities in front of the team. Would she wield her newfound trust with confidence, or would the specter of self-doubt cloud her judgment? The next day held the promise of revelation, but also threatened to plunge her back into a familiar darkness. The next morning arrived with reluctant rays of sunlight piercing through the clouds, as if urging Grace to embrace the day. The lingering dread of her upcoming training session hovered heavily in the air, her stomach knotting at the thought of standing before her team, exposed and perhaps vulnerable. Yet amid the chaos of emotions, a flicker of determination sparked within her, a whisper that today could be different. As she bustled around the ranch, preparing for the session, Grace's mind oscillated between anticipation and apprehension. She scrutinized her outline for the day, a meticulously crafted plan meant to guide her through the uncharted waters of leadership. As she glanced out the window at the horses grazing peacefully in the distance, she remembered Mark's words about growth and trust, and the internal dialogue in her head shifted ever so slightly towards the positive. When the team began to trickle in, Grace felt her heart race. Could she really foster the environment she envisioned? The apprehension almost paralyzed her, but she stood firm, reminding herself why they were all there. "Welcome, everyone," she called out, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She introduced the concept of hands-on training not just as a duty, but as an opportunity to learn and grow together. Confidence wavered in her voice, but steadied slightly as she saw nods of interest from her team. The session began with a practical demonstration, an exercise meant to revitalize their skills and encourage collaboration. Grace demonstrated the best way to handle a horse, her instructions clear, yet filled with an undercurrent of anxiety. She felt the pressure, every judgmental glance amplified, reminding her of a fear that had shadowed her for too long. But as she engaged with her team, She found herself captivated by their eagerness to learn. The energy in the room began to shift. Laughter replaced her palpable tension, and the camaraderie among them sparked a glimmer of reassurance. When a teammate, Sam, stepped up to share his own experiences, Grace listened intently. His stories echoed her fears, revealing vulnerabilities she had thought were unique to her alone. "Grace, can you show us again how you coax the horses?" Sam asked, prompting a wave of renewed engagement among the team. The request startled her, but as she nodded and stepped back into the circle, something remarkable happened. She forgot about her insecurities. Her focus shifted to the horses and her team. In that moment, Grace discovered a hidden talent within herself, the ability to connect and communicate, not only with the animals but with the people around her. The training session flourished, discussions flowed effortlessly, and she marveled at the insights shared by her team members. Each voice added a unique layer to the day's lessons, echoing the collaboration she had been yearning for, underscoring Mark's encouragement to trust not only herself but her team. With every shared story, she felt the burden of perfectionism dissipate, replaced by a collective commitment to learning from one another. However, as the session wrapped up, a nagging doubt crept back, threatening the triumph she felt. Were her efforts genuine, or was this just fleeting progress? Would she be able to maintain this environment of trust against the inevitable challenges that lay ahead? As the last of the team filed out, Grace's heart oscillated between exhilaration and lingering trepidation. She had faced a moment of vulnerability and emerged with a glimpse of hope, yet the uncertainty about sustaining this growth loomed large. "Ready for round 2 tomorrow?" Mark's voice snapped her from her thoughts as he approached, his face radiating pride. Grace hesitated, contemplating the spilling doubts that echoed beneath the surface of her newfound resolve. "I think we're just getting started," she replied, strength mingling with ambiguity. But even as the words left her mouth, she sensed a dark undercurrent pulling at her confidence. Could she transform this fragile beginning into something lasting? The moment lingered, and she understood the risk involved. Tomorrow would not just be a continuation. It would demand that she dig deeper, confronting not only her fears, but also what it truly meant to lead in the face of adversity. Would this fragile thread of hope withstand the storm yet to come? As the looming questions swirled, Grace felt the edges of her resolve fray, urging her to prepare for the latest challenge in her journey of transformation, a confrontation that might redefine who she was ultimately meant to be. The dawn brought with it a hopeful shimmer as Grace gazed out over the ranch, still exchanging whispers with the trees in the early morning air. Today marked a significant pivot in her life, an opportunity to consolidate everything she had learned about trust, vulnerability, and leadership in a practical way. Steeling herself, she walked toward the barn, the sense of purpose buoying her steps. The memory of yesterday's training session flickered in her mind like a warm flame, igniting a familiar confidence. She had navigated uncharted waters with poise, built bridges of communication with her team, and witnessed how collective effort drove genuine progress. Each laugh shared, every question answered in collaboration, reinforced her belief that what they were building was more than just a ranch. It was a community founded on mutual respect. Yet, shadows lingered, whispering reminders of the stakes involved. She had opened herself up to others, placing her trust at the mercy of shared vulnerabilities. How would she fare when challenges arose, when the reality of ranching threatened to pull them back into chaos? Would her vision withstand the inevitable storms? The weight of these thoughts pressed against her chest, nagging at the edges of her renewed resolve. Mark met her at the barn entrance, his upbeat greetings swirling through her apprehensive thoughts. Ready for the next session? His enthusiasm was contagious, and for a moment, it dulled her lingering fears. "Absolutely," Grace replied, feigning a confidence she hoped would resonate. She couldn't deny that there was a burgeoning excitement within her. Today would introduce hands-on training that involved not just her team, but the horses, the very embodiment of her father's legacy. As they gathered the crew, Grace felt the familiar pulse of energy rise. She structured the day carefully, ensuring participants would engage with their animals, honing their skills while deepening their connection not just to the horses, but to one another. Today's focus is on synergy, she explained, the words sometimes feeling foreign yet invigorating. Let us see how we can enhance our skills together. Grace watched as eyes filled with curiosity and eagerness flickered back at her, an affirming reminder that she was not alone in her journey. As she stepped forward to demonstrate, the anxiety began melting away, replaced by the comfort of familiarity with the horses. The rhythmic sound of hooves against the ground, the warmth of the animals under her hands, and the laughter shared with her team stirred a joy she had long thought lost. Okay, watch closely. It's all about creating trust, she instructed, guiding one of the horses through basic maneuvers. With each successful pacing, her team cheered, and she felt their unspoken bond strengthen. In that moment, Grace recognized the visceral connection teaching could forge, a reminder that from vulnerability springs empowerment. Yet, just as the successes mounted, the unexpected arrived like a thunderclap. A loud commotion erupted from the corral. A horse bolted, startled by a sudden noise. Instinctively, Grace's heart raced, and she felt an urge to protect her team while also securing the impulsive animal. "Everyone, stay calm. Focus on your breathing," she called, her voice slicing through the chaos. With a determination honed through her struggles, she centered herself, recalling all her training and experience. This would be her most significant test, yet not just in managing the horse, but in leading her team through the fear that threatened to envelop them. As she moved toward the panicking horse, she saw her team's faces mirror her own worry. This was it, the defining moment to prove that she had indeed transformed. It wasn't just about the ranch, it was about trust, courage, and the assurance that they could handle whatever life threw their way. Approaching the flailing horse, Grace remained steady, reaching out with calmness. "Breathe, stay with me," she whispered to the creature, her hands steady and clear. The horse's frantic movements began to slow as she harnessed the energy of her team. They instinctively aligned their movements as they worked together to create a serene environment. As the chaos settled, the panicked horse yielded, eventually softening under her touch. The cheers erupted from her team, infusing her spirit with confidence. They had weathered the storm, not as individuals, but as a cohesive unit. "That was incredible," Mark exclaimed, his expression filled with pride as he approached her. "You managed the situation beautifully, Grace." Her laughter echoed lightly in the wind. It was all of us together. In that moment, the chasm of doubt that had loomed over her dissipated completely. This was no longer simply a business venture. It was a testament to the journey she had undertaken. She realized she had woven her fears and struggles into her leadership, allowing them to forge resilience rather than angst. Returning to calm, Grace felt a gentle exhilaration coursing through her veins. She had faced uncertainty and emerged stronger. She had embraced vulnerability and transformed it into a powerful asset, one that had resonated not just within her heart, but also within the hearts of her team. That newfound clarity would guide them forward, reinforcing their partnership as they embraced the journey of renewal. With determination etched upon her heart, she understood a vital truth. Growth was a continuous dance, an evolving embrace of triumphs and failures alike. Grace no longer just believed. She had succeeded in becoming the ranch owner her father would have been proud of, filled with integrity, strength, and an unwavering commitment to honor both her past and the future of the ranch. "Let us keep building this," she urged, her voice steady, clear. "If we can succeed through this day, we can face whatever challenges lie ahead. Together." As the sun dipped low, casting golden hues across their world, Grace sensed the clarity of her ambition, crystallizing the knowledge that, in achieving a balance between heart and strategy, she had claimed her place not just as a rancher, but as a transformative leader. The future beckoned with untapped possibilities, ready for her to seize. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes all the difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this uplifting story. This is the moment to show your support and let others witness the power of personal overcoming.